the trees close in, and the sound of Roman shield shattering echoes through the fog. It is early September of 9 AD, and the Roman commander Publius Quinctilius Varus leads 3 legions, a handful of auxiliary cohorts, and a convoy of supply wagons along a narrow, winding track that snakes through the dense hills of what will later be called the Teutoburg forest. The sun has already slipped behind the canopy, and a damp chill settles on the marchers' backs. Varus, a seasoned administrator but little more than a political appointee, trusts the counsel of Arminius, a Germanic chieftain who grew up in the Roman auxiliaries, learned the language of the legion, and earned the rank of equestrian. Arminius has been praised publicly for his loyalty, and Varus believes the route he has chosen will be a swift, uneventful march back to the Rhine, where he can report his successful pacification of the tribes east of the river. The first beat of the story unfolds at the Roman camp at Vetera on the Rhine near modern Xanten, where the legions, 17, 18, and 19, are still humming with the discipline that made the empire unstoppable. Soldiers sharpen gladius blades, the clatter of armor blends with the chatter of camp followers, and the smell of boiled pork and fresh earth fills the air. Supplies are counted, standards are polished, and the eagle standards of each legion gleam in the morning light. Varus receives a report from a local chieftain that a distant tribe has submitted without resistance. He smiles, believing the Germanic lands are finally tamed, and orders his troops to march inland, confident that the road ahead is merely a logistical inconvenience. The second beat accelerates as the column leaves the open fields and enters the forest. The path narrows to a dirt track barely wide enough for 2 wagons side by side. Sunlight flickers through the high canopy, casting shifting shadows that make the soldiers uneasy. Arminius rides ahead, his horse kicking up leaves, while a handful of Germanic scouts slip silently into the underbrush. The Roman soldiers, accustomed to the orderly roads of the empire, begin to feel the weight of the unfamiliar terrain. Their heavy sandals sink into the soft soil, and the sound of marching becomes a muffled thud. The supply wagons creak, the oxen snort, and the men tighten their grips on their shields, aware that the forest hides more than just trees. Then the ambush erupts. The third beat is a cascade of chaos. From the shadows, a wave of Germanic warriors, chiefs, youths, and seasoned hunters emerge, brandishing spears, axes, and short swords. They strike the flanks of the column, setting fire to the wagons and sending smoke curling through the trees. The Roman standard-bearers try to rally their men, but the dense foliage blocks any chance of forming a cohesive line. The legionaries, trained to fight in open formations, find themselves thrust into a melee where every step could be a trap. The sound of metal on metal rings out, mingled with the guttural war cries of the tribesmen. Arrows whistle past, some finding the soft spots behind helmets, others embedding in trunks. The Roman discipline begins to crumble as panic spreads, the disciplined ranks dissolve into frantic clusters scrambling for cover. The forest becomes a labyrinth of death. The Roman cavalry, unable to maneuver in the tangled underbrush, is forced to dismount and fight on foot. The auxiliary cohorts, composed of Germanic recruits who had once served Rome, turn their swords against their former commanders. The legionaries, still shouting the names of their emperors, are cut down by hidden spears thrust from the shadows. Estimates suggest that up to 20,000 soldiers are lost, though the exact number remains debated. The eagles of the 3 legions, symbols of Rome's might, are captured or fall into the mire, though later Germanicus succeeded in recovering at least 2 of them. Varus himself disappears in the frenzy. Some accounts claim he took his own life to avoid capture, while others suggest he was slain by a spear thrust through the chest. The fourth beat moves beyond the battlefield to the stunned reaction of the empire. News of the disaster reaches Rome in a handful of frantic messengers who stumble through the Rhine, their faces pale, their voices hoarse. Emperor Augustus, seated in his marble villa, receives the report like a blow to his sternum. He had envisioned a peaceful frontier, a line of fortifications that would keep the Germanic tribes in check. Instead, he is confronted with the loss of 3 entire legions, the disappearance of priceless eagle standards, and a psychological wound that will echo through the empire for decades. Contemporary sources record that Augustus expressed deep sorrow, describing the loss as a calamity of unprecedented scale. The Senate debates whether to launch a punitive expedition or to accept the Rhine as the empire's permanent border. Mid-story, the narrative turns with a revelation that reshapes the whole picture. The exact location of the battle, long a matter of speculation, was uncovered in the 1980s near the modern village of Calcrease. Archaeologists unearthed thousands of Roman weapons, fragments of armor, and pieces of the lost eagles, confirming that the ambush took place on a broad, marshy plain at the edge of the forest, not deep within the woods as earlier chroniclers had imagined. This find shows that the Romans had been forced into a constrained defensive position by a coordinated blockade of the forest's exits, a tactic that turned the terrain itself into a weapon. The discovery also revealed that the Germanic forces were far more organized than the Roman accounts had suggested. They had prepared roads, stockpiled supplies, and coordinated attacks across multiple tribal groups. The turn forces the viewer to reconsider the Roman narrative of a simple surprise attack and recognize a sophisticated, pre-planned campaign of resistance. The fifth beat follows the empire's attempts at retaliation. A few years later, the Roman general Germanicus leads a series of campaigns across the Rhine, reclaiming some lost eagles and exacting vengeance on the tribes that had betrayed Rome. Yet even his victories are tempered by the knowledge that the forest still holds the memory of the massacre. The Roman army, now aware of the deadly potential of the Germanic terrain, begins to adapt its tactics, building fortified camps and employing local guides. Still, the psychological scar remains. The phrase Varus's disaster becomes a cautionary tale taught to every legionary, a reminder that even the mightiest empire can be undone by overconfidence and unfamiliar ground. The final beat drifts into the haunting aftermath that still puzzles historians. The Teutoburg forest stands today as a quiet, moss-covered landscape, its trees whispering stories that have survived for 2 millennia. Scholars still debate whether the Roman Empire could ever have fully subjugated the Germanic lands, or whether the disaster marked a deliberate strategic decision to halt expansion. Some argue that the loss of the legions forced Augustus to focus on consolidating the empire's borders, ultimately preserving its stability for centuries. Others wonder if a different commander, a more cautious route, or a better understanding of the terrain might have saved the legions and altered the course of European history. The unanswered question lingers like the mist among the ancient trees. What if the empire had not been humbled here? The forest keeps its secret, and the echo of shattered shields still reverberates through the annals of Rome, reminding us that even the most disciplined forces can be undone by the unknown.